What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Flame Entertainment and Sports. It's your boy Rob here. After a week off, we're back, and we have a great episode today. We start off in entertainment, covering the season 10 premiere of Bachelor in Paradise. In the sports world, we start off with the Miami Dolphins as they reacquire All-Pro safety Minkah Fitzpatrick. The Miami Heat acquire NBA champion Norm Powell. Make sure to keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok at @theflame_ES. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And now let's get into this episode, starting off with the season 10 premiere of Bachelor in Paradise. All right, guys, we're going to start off this episode by recapping episode 1 of the new season of Bachelor in Paradise. After taking last summer off, Paradise is back for season 10. The first 9 seasons were shot in Mexico. This one was shot in Costa Rica. And that's not the only, new change to the show. The episode was 3 hours long, which I actually liked because I feel like in past Paradise seasons, when you think of the first episode, it's really like an intro, to most of the contestants, which is pretty cool. But it could be pretty boring if that's the only thing you're giving in the whole episode. So I appreciated it that this one was long enough that, yes, like we got a brief, introduction to the contestants, but we also got a rose ceremony. We had like multiple love triangles already, and I feel like that probably would have played out in past seasons, like from episode 1 to episode 2 would have been what we got in full for this first episode of season 10. So I really like that aspect of it. A couple other changes. I like the new cameras they're using are like way more modern. I didn't realize, watching the previous season like 2 summers ago that, Paradise really did need a lot of these upgrades, and they really needed to get with the times in terms of how reality TV shows are shot and, done today. Like, after watching this first episode of the new season, I'm like, wow, I didn't really realize that they even needed different cameras. I love the new resort they're in. Like, in the past where they stayed in Mexico, the contestants, didn't have air conditioning, like it was a cool, looking place, like for Paradise, but when you think of all those little things for the contestants, it was like, oh damn, that's so weird. And this show's on, by ABC and by Disney. This show brings so much money in. Like, why can they, give some air conditioning? And then like for this new edition now of Paradise, each contestant has a roommate. They have their own room. They have air. They're staying inside of a resort there. So I think that's pretty cool. And I actually like the look of the resort too, because it's more modern looking in comparison to like how it used to look where they filmed in Mexico. No, this really showed, that they needed a lot of these upgrades. And as for the cast, I think it was a great first episode for the whole cast. And I think that goes back to my point of liking the 3-hour long format because, it got to give us like a good enough intro for each of the cast members. I feel like in the past, like it'll be like 3 or 4 people who are really highlighted, and then the rest are like kind of would be like brief intros. But this one really, because of the time of the episode, it allowed, I think, the show or the producers to like show each contestant and give them a good amount of time in terms of introducing themselves or reintroducing themselves. For me, the majority of the cast members are new because I haven't fully watched the past couple seasons of The Bachelor or Bachelorette. Like some of them, I know through like social media or like in the final, in the end for this season or that season. But then we do have a familiar face who I want to start out talking with, which is Dale Moss, who is most, famously known for being on Claire Crawley's season and for them getting engaged, having the earliest engagement, I think, in Bachelor or Bachelorette history. I believe they're like 2 or 3 episodes in, and Claire decides she wants to leave with the show and, pursue things with Dale. And, that was back in 2020 during the COVID season where, we had Claire and then, her and Dale leave, and then it becomes Tayshia's season. So, it was cool to have at least one familiar face in Dale. And I feel like because his time, although it was short, it was so like impactful in terms of Bachelor Nation history. I feel like seeing him back on our screens kind of gave us like a little blast to the past and, had the fans reminiscing about those times where it was a pretty good era. When you think of all those seasons that occurred in that time period, that was probably the best era that the show's ever had. So having a brief little, nostalgic moment, like having Dale on the show, I think is really cool and brings us back to that old time. And then for the new people who are post COVID season, it also gives them an opportunity to, learn more about a contestant rather than through the headlines, which they all saw of him getting engaged so early in the process. So I like that element of it too with Dale. Dale hits things off with Kat. She was on Bachelor, and then she was on the most recent season of Paradise 2 summers ago, season 8, where she ended up getting engaged to John Henry, But her and John Henry since that time ended their engagement. And I guess she was single. She wanted to go back on Paradise, and yeah, her and Dale have hit things off. In terms of episode 1, they went on a one-on-one date. Dale was the first one to have a date card. He was the latest. Like, they introduced a whole bunch of people, and then he came after, kind of to a surprise where nobody really thought anyone else was coming. But during the first date, he appears, and yeah, he takes Kat on a date. They go, on a boat. They go boating around, and they really hit things off. Another couple we had here, who I thought began the episode of Paradise as one of the lead couples early in the season. That was Jess and Spencer. I thought they really hit things off good. They both had like cool personalities, likable personalities on the beach in Paradise this season, and I just feel like they're probably gonna go a long way this season. I know it's only episode 1, but I just feel with them two specifically, it kind of feels real from day 1, and I can really see them ending Paradise together. We're gonna have to wait and see on that, but I really enjoyed seeing them. And then they're also involved, towards the end of the episode in a triangle. One of the newcomers who came throughout the first episode was Sam, who was known as the villain of Jen's season of The Bachelorette. I think a lot of people were surprised to see him on Paradise because after his exit from Jen's season, there was a lot of stuff that he had posted criticizing the show and the producers and everything. So it was interesting to see him in the show kind of rekindle their relationship after, some drama was said from Sam's side. But, it was cool to have him on the beach. But when he gets here, he does have a date card, and he takes Jess on the date. And then it seems like they really hit things off in that date. But I kind of felt, even though Jess was, enjoying her time with Sam, I felt like ultimately she would give her rose to Spencer. I just felt more of a spark with her and Spencer. And ultimately, Jess did give her rose to Spencer. And, the women had the roses the first week. So I'm sure episode 2 or the second rose ceremony, the guys will have the power. We had 10 guys and 6 girls, so 4 guys ended up leaving. A couple of the other couples that ended together this first episode, Bailey and Jeremy, they're, I would say, an unexpected couple. At first, I was kind of feeling friendship vibes, and midway through, you kind of felt more seriousness. But then by the end of it, you kind of felt like it was friendship vibes on Jeremy's side, but more than friends on Bailey's side. Yeah, because Jeremy, like he got his rose from Bailey, but in his little ITM after that, he said like, he was happy to get a rose and he's enjoying getting to know Bailey, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's only focused on her, which is pretty cool. Like I like that. I like that frame of mind or that thinking when you're on the show, because I feel in the past a lot of people from episode day 1 they kind of just focus on one person, and ultimately it kind of doesn't work out in the end. But I understand both sides because some people just they're attracted to one person on day 1 and they kind of just want to focus on them the rest of the way. And then like in this case with Jeremy, he's more open-minded, which I like too, because at the end of the day, it's only been 2 or 3 days to when like him and Bailey started talking. So I mean, you can't blame him for being open-minded, but I feel like there'll probably be some drama as the season goes on. Like I think they'll be together for a while, but I think ultimately things will break off. Not necessarily in a malicious way from either side, but I just feel there would be some sort of drama if we're like halfway, let's say, through the season, they're together, but then Jeremy and the ITMs, he's still kind of questioning whether he's fully committed. Then that's kind of when things will start to like kind of boil down, or not boil down. I mean, things will start to get a little heated, but ultimately we'll see what happens with them. And another couple we had was Zoe and Brian. That was a very unexpected one in terms of like how the episode started for each of them. Zoe gave out a super cool vibe and stuff, and Brian, he seemed pretty cool too. They both seemed like they're just literally trying to find people to be in relationships with, and ultimately, they ended the first episode with that. But as we see the season preview or the rest of the trailer, whatever you want to call it, at the end of this episode, we see that Brian may be involved in some drama. So ultimately, it's going to be interesting to see if Zoe and Brian, are able to be together here for the rest of the season. We're going to have to wait and see on that. Another couple that ended here this first episode, Alex and Jonathan. Jonathan, a big fan favorite from Jen's season of Bachelorette. And yeah, I thought ultimately Alex, it was a love triangle here. It was Alex with Ricky and then Alex with Jonathan. I thought ultimately, like watching the show, I didn't know the spoilers ahead of time. So I didn't know that Alex would give her a rose to Jonathan. But ultimately, like, if I didn't know the spoilers, I would have thought that Alex was going to give her a rose to Ricky, but ultimately that could also be editing. Maybe the producers wanted to make it seem like she was more into Ricky when she was really more into Jonathan. But by the way she was talking and stuff, it kind of felt like she was going to give it to Ricky, because I felt like she had more of a connection with Ricky, and with Jonathan, she kind of like, you could tell she was into him, but then she was questioning him because she hadn't heard as much from in comparison to what she's heard from Ricky. But ultimately, maybe that's what swayed her. Maybe she felt Ricky was too much of a talker, and that Jonathan is kind of one of those people where, like, he talks when he feels like it's time, but he's not gonna just keep on talking. He's gonna kind of wait his turn. So, that was interesting to see Alex, give her a rose to Jonathan. Another couple that ended this first episode together was Lexi and Justin. So Justin, he's from Katie Thurston's season of Bachelorette. He's a big fan favorite. It's his second time now in Paradise. Second or third time now in Paradise. And it was cool to see Justin back. I believe the show started filming maybe in May. I want to say him and Susie Evans from Clayton's season, they broke up in around February or March. So it was interesting that Justin, is on Paradise, and he was ready, so ready to go back into the dating world after, being in a pretty long relationship with Susie. For those of you who don't know, Susie will be appearing on this season, so she will be on the beach. So ultimately, we could kind of all easily assume, if we watched the show before, that either Justin and Susie will rekindle, or one of them will call it off with the other at some point. So, it was interesting though. Justin and Lexi, they originally had the first one-on-one of the season, but it rained in Costa Rica that night, so they weren't able to film. But then ultimately, they got like a date during the day, and it went pretty good. But it was really giving like friendship vibes. Justin, he did bring up to Lexi that he still doesn't know if he's fully over Susie. And I feel like all of us watching were like, Justin does have Susie in the back of his head. Like, the whole time Lexi and Justin would talk, I would just instantly think about Susie. So, ultimately this is going to end kind of like I said, Justin and Susie will get back together on the show, or, either Justin will go home and Susie will go home because one of them doesn't want to rekindle. And then Lexi, I feel like she has a great mindset in terms of like beginning this relationship or whatever, friendship with Justin, because she does keep bringing up the fact that she doesn't know if Justin is over Susie, since it's only been a couple months since they broke up. So I think Lexi has a great approach. I think, her giving her flower to Justin, maybe some people criticize that because they're like, well, why you giving it to him when he's still not over Susie? But then I understand her side, because I feel like for her, it was kind of like, yes, Susie's there, but you know what? Let's just give this a chance. And at the end of the day, she didn't really vibe maybe with any of the other guys. So she was probably like, you know what? Me and this guy vibe. He's been nice. Yes, he just got out of a relationship, but, I'll give him the rose because, we get along. So, from that aspect, yeah, it's going to be interesting now going forward. This is going to be a major headline, one of the storylines this year and this season of Paradise. The whole, Justin Susie thing, will they rekindle? Will they break up once again? It's going to be a whole storyline for a couple episodes here. So those are the couples so far after episode 1 of Paradise season 10. The people that went home were Hakeem, Kyle, Ricky, and Sam. And yeah, that's another element I love. I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, this 3-hour long format is that, yeah, as I said already, it wasn't just the intros. It wasn't just like the couples initially meeting. It was like the intros, the couples meeting, but then newcomers coming, and then like some love triangles forming, and then we get a whole rose ceremony already. I find that super cool, because when I like a show, I rather have it long, and I also rather have it be more to the actual point or result, rather than just like the little like the filler. I'd rather have the whole thing come out already in episode 1, if that makes sense, if I describe that the right way. And yeah, so next week we'll get 2 episodes of Paradise. Episode 2 will be on Monday, and episode 3 will be on Tuesday. We get a double dose of Paradise next week, so it's going to be interesting. I mean, this was already 3 hours, and then next week we got 2. I'm super excited because I really enjoyed this first episode. I think the new format, the new cameras, the whole new vibe is kind of feeling like a Love Island type of thing, which I think is smart. I know some people are criticizing it. It feels like they're copying. I just feel like they finally have the people in place now, in terms of production and leading the way, that realize they have to adapt to this new age of reality TV. Like, don't get me wrong, The Bachelor will always have its fans because it's one of the originals, right? And reality dating. But at the end of the day, if they don't adapt, they're going to die out at a certain point. I feel like them deciding to bring in some new showrunners and not only for Paradise, but I know for the next Bachelor season, it's a new showrunner as well. I feel like they kind of realized maybe it's time to adapt to the new age of reality TV. And I think this is a great start here with episode 1 of season 10 of Bachelor in Paradise. Start off the sports section for our episode this week as the Miami Dolphins traded away Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith to the Pittsburgh Steelers in exchange for former Dolphin first-round pick and all-pro safety Minkah Fitzpatrick. Who would have thought all these years later that Minkah Fitzpatrick will return and play once again in the Miami Dolphins uniform? We drafted Minkah 6 years ago out of Alabama. I loved him out of college. I was super excited to have him in Miami. Brian Flores and him didn't get along. Flores, I believe, wanted him to play corner. Minkah wanted to play safety. And ultimately, Minkah demanded a trade. We traded him to the Steelers. The rest of his history, he's been an all-pro, multi-time all-pro safety in Pittsburgh under Mike Tomlin. And, now the Dolphins get him back. Minkah is still 28 years old, so he's still in his 20s. He's still one of the premier safeties in all of football. And not only is he a premier player and, one of the top at his position, what I love the most about this trade is that the Dolphins got a guy who fits a position of need, right? Of course, we have a couple of safeties we signed in the offseason. One from Detroit. We signed another from the Jets, who I wanted, Ashton Davis. So I'm excited about that. But ultimately, the two guys we brought in are kind of unproven in terms of relying on either one of them to being a high caliber safety at this point in their careers. So with that said, this is a perfect fit. Like I said, that's my favorite part of this whole thing. Bringing back Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he's going to really help this defense. He's been praised over the years in Pittsburgh for his leadership. I feel like that's one of the key elements this Dolphin team has been missing for the last 3 or 4 years, but even before that, it's been a while since we've had true leadership on the team. But I feel like Minkah, that's another thing, underrated aspect of his game is his leadership. He encourages the guys around him. He's a high IQ player. He's basically like a coach on the field. And then you put that all together, and he's one of the top safeties in the league as well. So yeah, super happy to have Minkah back with the Dolphins. I think he's gonna really help our defense take it up a notch and really help that secondary that's pretty young right now and unproven. I think to bring in at least one guy who could help out is really essential, especially ahead of training camp in the preseason. I think it's really smart. Regardless, I would have been happy with Minkah at any point, but I feel it's better now than it would have been, let's say, after the preseason or during preseason, because there wouldn't have been enough time, in my opinion, for everyone to kind of come together and getting that chemistry together. And yeah, we're going to be relying heavily on Minkah right now. I think he's going to do a great job, with our defense coordinator, Anthony Weaver. I think this is going to allow Weaver to be more open and more creative. With a guy like that, at the back end of your defense, you have a lot more leeway, and it's going to give opportunities for some of the young and unproven guys that we have to make a name for themselves and step up and help this team gain some more victories in the upcoming season. As for Ramsey, I think this is an absolute home run that Chris Grier was able to get an all-pro guy who's younger than Ramsey in exchange for him, as Ramsey, within the last couple months, all he's done is kind of cause a distraction to the team. He never even reported to Miami for mini camp, off-season, training camp, any of that. And, at the end of the day, I want guys who on the team who actually want to be here, not guys who just want their money. And, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Ramsey, a short 2 seasons here. He had some nice moments early on, but ultimately, we did give him an extension last offseason. And then he comes back this offseason asking for more money. I don't really understand that. If you're really a team guy and about winning, you'll try to do all you can to help the team. And I'm not blaming Ramsey for wanting to get his money, but at the end of the day, he's been one of the highest paid corners in the league for a while now. He's already in his 30s. Last season was probably the worst season of his career. He looks slower than I've ever seen before. But with all that said, I do wish him the best. I hope he does great things at Pittsburgh and beyond. As for Jonnu Smith, what a season. And his lone season in Miami, he had statistically the greatest season by a tight end in Dolphins history. And we have a great line of, tight ends in our history. So that speaks volumes as to the impact that Jonnu made in his, lone season here in Miami. So shout out to Jonnu for a hell of a season. And we wish him all the best as well in Pittsburgh and beyond. He reunites now with Arthur Smith, who's the OC in Pittsburgh and was Jonnu's head coach actually in Atlanta and his OC in Tennessee. So they have a previous history. I think he'll be a great weapon for Aaron Rodgers. I think Rodgers and Smith will have a great, chemistry just like Tua and Smith had this past season. And then, the Dolphins made another trade the following day. So on Tuesday, obviously, since they traded Jonnu, you knew they were going to try to get another tight end, being that their tight end room is kind of unproven and young right now. And what they did, they made a trade with the Giants. So they traded away a 6th-round pick to the New York Giants in exchange for a 7th-round pick and unretired former All-Pro tight end Darren Waller. Who would have thought? So Darren Waller, for those of you that don't know, of course, he has a great story. He's gone through a lot of stuff in his life. He was an alcoholic. He was almost out of football early on. He started off with the Ravens. He was a receiver out of college. He got sober. He goes to the Raiders, becomes an All-Pro tight end multiple times. Actually, the tight ends coach at the time over there with the Raiders was Frank Smith, who's the current offensive coordinator here in Miami. And Waller saw the best years of his career under Smith, so we're hoping that's the same case here in Miami now that he joins the Dolphins. And with that said, yeah, he's gone through a lot. Last year, he retires while under contract with the Giants, and now ultimately, after a year away from the game, I saw a quote that he's back in it because he loves the game. That's what he wants to do. He just wants to play football again. It's a 1-year deal for $5 million, and I say, hey, why not take a chance on it? I think it's a great under the radar type of deal by Chris Grier. And yeah, with all that said, to wrap up this Dolphin section of the podcast, shout out to Chris Grier. I think he made 2 home run trades this week for the Dolphins. He got us much better than we were previously, and it brings more excitement. And I'm super excited to see what the new additions of Minkah Fitzpatrick and Darren Waller will do for the Miami Dolphins in the upcoming NFL season. Fins up. Let's go. So now to get into the next Miami sports team that made some trade news, as the Miami Heat acquired Norm Powell in a 3-team deal with the LA Clippers and the Utah Jazz. The Heat sent out Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love to Utah, while the Clippers acquired John Collins from the Jazz. And the Heat, as I said, acquired Norm Powell. Powell's coming off of the best season of his NBA career. He was an NBA champion in 2019 for the Toronto Raptors. He's been in contention for the 6th-man award for multiple years in his career. This past season was, I believe, the season that he started the most in because, the Clippers, as they've had over the last 5 to 6 years, they've had a lot of injuries on that team. So, it worked out in Norm's favor in terms of him getting more playing time than he had typically gotten prior to joining the Clippers. And it very much paid off as he was arguably on the brink of becoming an all-star for the first time in his career. I wanted to talk about this trade because I think it's an absolute home run move by the Heat front office. You could add it in to the many steals that Pat Riley and this front office have done for the last 30 years here in Miami. The fact that we got a guy who was basically an all-star scorer last year in exchange for 2 veteran, role players that most likely weren't going to get much playing time in the upcoming season. It's just unbelievable. And then you add on that Norm is also, on an expiring deal, earning around $20 million for the upcoming season. And he's going to provide much needed scoring. And something else I'm excited about is the ball creation that he's going to bring to this Miami Heat team. Many people have spoken about it, but this past season, if it weren't for Tyler Herro, the Heat arguably would have had the worst offense in the whole NBA. Tyler was really the only creator and consistent shooter on the team. And now you add in a guy like Norm Powell, who, as I said, is a nice shooter, but he's also a great creator. He's able to, drive in and draw fouls, and something I'm very excited about as well. I think he's going to be able to create some open opportunities for others because now the defenses are going to be, focusing on Powell. So yeah, I love that. What I love the most about the trade is, we got someone who very much fills a lot of needs that we very much needed in order to, move up a level in the upcoming season. With that said, I'm not fully sold on Powell's fit next to Tyler Herro. I have heard some good points, from people who believe they can play together due to Norm's, his ability to create. Is going to allow Tyler to get freed up and, maybe get back to some of that off-ball, shooting that he was known for early on in his career. As I said, this past season, the ball was pretty much in Tyler's hands and then everyone else kind of standing around. And at the end of the day, we saw what happened in the first round of the playoffs. Cleveland, once they fully put their focus on Herro, the rest of the Heat offense pretty much did nothing. And, that led to those final 2 games, the Heat losing by a combined 92 points. So, yeah, many people think that Herro and Powell, like I said, could fit together, as I said already, because of Powell's ball creation and not allowing Herro to get freed up and not having to handle the ball the whole time. I see it from a certain aspect, but I feel I'm not completely sold on it. So with that said, my reaction to this trade, I was super happy. Powell's a guy I've wanted in Miami for around the last 4 or 5 years. I want to shout out, the original co-host of this podcast, my boy Brandon. Me and him have wanted Norm Powell here in Miami for a long time. So obviously, super excited to have him here finally. And I know the Heat have been interested in him for a while now. So it's amazing they're able to get him, and at such a bargain, such a steal. But with that said, after the initial excitement of having Powell now part of the Heat and him bringing so much life to a pretty bland offense, it got me to thinking, could this be a precursor to a potential Tyler Herro trade? For those of you that don't know, Tyler, he has 1 year left on his deal, and after that, he's going to be eligible for a very large contract where he'll be likely getting paid over $50 million per season. As of right now, in my opinion, Tyler hasn't shown he's a number one guy. And then you also have Bam, who after this season as well, his super max contract's going to kick in, I believe, to around $56 million per season. Bam also is not a true number one guy, but I would prefer to keep Bam over Tyler for that price, because I believe what Bam brings, his defensive ability, is very rare to find. Bam's a guy who could cover any player in the league. He could guard 1 through 5, and that's not something you find every day. In terms of Tyler, I'm a huge fan of him. But at the end of the day, what he provides mainly is scoring, and he does that at an amazing level, amazing ability to shoot the ball. He does a great job, but I feel like you compare it to a guy like Norm Powell, who, as I said, Norm is going to get paid $20 million this year. And like I said, Tyler will be eligible to get around $50 million per year. And they're basically at the same level. Yes, Tyler maybe is a little better because he's younger and in his prime right now and still in his 20s, while Norm is in his early 30s already. So, of course, he's older than Tyler. But ultimately, if you see a $30 million difference and then you see what Powell's able to do, does that lead the front office to being more open to dealing Tyler and seeing what they could get in the open market for him? And perhaps, gaining some other players who are better fits around Norm Powell going forward. So, yeah, that was my second reaction to this trade. Could this be a precursor, as I said, to a potential Tyler Herro trade? Another point I want to bring up, a lot of fans are trying to figure out what type of lineup, as of right now, Spoelstra and the Heat would like to see out there. Many people could envision a lineup of Herro, Norm Powell, and Andrew Wiggins or Nikola Jovic. And then some people would prefer to have Powell on the bench and have Davion Mitchell and Tyler Herro in the backcourt. Me personally, I would prefer to not have Herro and Norm in the same lineup. My ideal preference, honestly, would be to see a lineup of Davion Mitchell, Norm Powell, Nikola Jovic, Bam, and Kel'el Ware. Like I said, I am a huge Tyler fan. Throughout the years, I've been a big advocate of Tyler. Through all the trade rumors, through all the stuff he's gone through here in Miami, I want Tyler to be here. But as I said, neither him or Bam have proven to me or anyone else that they're true number one guys. So do you really feel comfortable moving forward? You already gave Bam that extension that's about to kick in. Do you also want to give that huge extension that Tyler, do you ultimately feel like committing the most money in your salary cap to those two guys is really going to lead you into being a true championship contender? I would say no. I don't believe that whatsoever. I feel like you need a lot more. If you're really going to pay that amount of money to guys, you really need guys that are like franchise changers and guys that can really lead you to that next level. And I just feel like Tyler's elite at one thing, which is offense, and then Bam's elite at one thing, which is defense. But like I said a couple minutes ago, what Bam does is more rare, and you're not going to be able to just find that with any random guy. I feel like Tyler, you might be able to find one or two guys for less money, and they could equally provide what Tyler provides at the $50 million mark that he's set to make after next season. So yeah, those are a couple points I wanted to bring up here. And yeah, I can't really envision that Herro Norm Powell backcourt for some reason, especially if it's Mitchell, Herro, and Powell. I feel like it would just be too small. I know, you have Bam and Kel'el Ware, but still, I just feel like a lineup containing Mitchell, Herro, and Powell is way too small, specifically on the defensive end. And then another reason why I prefer to have Davion Mitchell starting rather than off the bench is because I feel his defensive tenacity is going to be needed from the jump. Yeah, can he excel off the bench? Of course. I think Davion Mitchell, if you put him as a full-time bench guy, he'll most likely win 6th Man of the Year in the NBA. But with that said, I just feel like his defense ability is needed from early on. You don't want to be in a situation where, let's say, you have a lineup of Herro and Powell in your backcourt, and, let's say, you're down 10 or 12 points early in the game, and then all of a sudden, we have to throw in Davion, and we have to all of a sudden go to another level of defense and try to, play a game of, catch up and all that stuff. I just don't feel like that's a successful recipe for success, because you're going to have to, you need something consistent to be a true contender. You can't just kind of try to come back all the time and try to put off these crazy miracles. That's not really going to lead you to winning a championship Can it lead you to the finals? Maybe, potentially, but I want something more consistent, and I feel like it'll be more efficient and smart of the Heat to prioritize having Davion Mitchell as their starting point guard because his defensive ability is just so amazing. And to be able to have two elite defenders in Davion Mitchell and Bam Adebayo in the starting lineup, I think will be amazing for the Heat overall. But yeah, guys, I just wanted to make sure to share those thoughts. As I said, excited to have Norm Powell here in Miami. And like I said, I wanted to give all my, raw thoughts, including on Tyler Herro and all the stuff I'm envisioning and all the thoughts I have on the whole Heat situation. And I am expecting more moves to be made for the Heat. If you look at the roster right now, I feel like it's a little incomplete in terms of fit. And as I said, I do prefer a Mitchell Powell backcourt and have them alongside Jovic, Bam, and Kel'el Ware. So, I'm super intrigued and excited to see what else the Heat have planned up their sleeves this offseason. But yeah, with all that said, guys, it's going to wrap up our talk on the Miami Heat acquiring Norm Powell. Thank you so much for tuning in to our episode this week. Hope you guys enjoyed our recap of season 10, episode 1 of Bachelor in Paradise. Hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on the Dolphins reacquiring Minkah Fitzpatrick, the Heat getting Norm Powell. And again, make sure to keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok at @theflame_ES. Stay tuned for more content coming your way. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Until next time, everyone, take care.